in this lesson, we'll begin to work on the look of our broadcast piece. Okay, so go ahead and jump in here where we are at this point. Let's go ahead and jump into our render settings, and we can go to output. I'm going to go ahead and leave the size as is. If you want to choose a name for this project, you can go ahead and save out your renders as you go. We can go to anti-aliasing, and I'm going to go ahead and turn up the anti-aliasing to best, and I'm going to change the max level to 2 by 2, and then on the filter I'm going to change that to Gauss. And let's go ahead and just take a quick render. You can render it here in the view by simply going to render view. You've already done this, but rendering the view, or you can render to the picture viewer as well. So we'll go ahead and render our view. So the first thing that we want to do is maybe add a background to this. So to be able to do that, we can go ahead and we want to add a background. So come up here, add background. Now we need to add a material to this background. So we'll go to create, new material. Let's drop it onto our background, and I want to have sort of a gradient effect here. And so if we again just kind of render this, we'll be able to see the result. So now it's just kind of this white area. So what we can do is add a gradient into our material, and I'm actually going to pipe this into the luminance. And let's go ahead under texture and let's create a gradient. Now the gradient itself, we want it to be a circular gradient. All right, we want it to be darker on the edges. So I'll kind of switch those around a little bit. And in here, let's add sort of a kind of a desaturated blue. Okay, and I'm going to make that a little bit lighter. Okay, I'm going to add another one in here that's more of a light, almost white. Okay, and then you can play around with the gradient and how that looks as far as the transition here. We can do another render. And see what that looks like. There we go. So I don't want it to be completely black on the outside. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of bring this in a little bit. And I've turned color off here. So let me go ahead and get kind of a more of a dark gray. And then you can do another render there. You can also do kind of an interactive. And I think that's still maybe a little bit too dark. So you can always come in on your gradient and modify that a little if you want to. Maybe bring a little bit of blue into it. So it's just a little bit darker than the rest. Okay, so something like that. Now I also want to add a sky element here to be able to use for reflections. So let's go in and add a sky. Now the sky needs a material as well, so let's go ahead and create a new material. And we'll add it to the sky. And then in the sky's color, I'm going to go ahead and drop in a image. And in your images folder, there's a backdrop_1. We'll go ahead and open that up. And it's just an image with a few of these light planes added to it that you can use for reflections. Okay, now we don't want the sky to show up in the render. So if we go ahead and render this, we don't want that to show up in the render. So what we can do is add a compositing tag to this. So let's go ahead and add a compositing tag to our sky. And I want to turn off seen by camera. And we'll go ahead and render that. And now we can use that for reflections, but we aren't seeing that in the camera. Okay. We also want to add a few lights. So a couple of lights to kind of illuminate some areas back here, create some shadows. So the first light we'll create is an area light. So let's go ahead and bring in an area light. And you can see our light here. Go ahead and back out a little bit. And I'm actually going to turn off the word sweep for now, so we don't have all that weight. Okay. So now I want to take the area light and I'm just going to move it over here, kind of to the right of our project. Okay. We can enlarge it a bit. Okay. And then I also want to bring it sort of up a little bit more, and let's kind of rotate it around a little. So we'll kind of rotate it this way, and then we'll rotate it around a little. Okay. So under the area light, let's go ahead and change some attributes. So let's go ahead and do a quick render here. Okay. So under the area light, let's go ahead and choose for the shadows, area shadows. Let's increase the intensity a little bit. Okay. And let's go ahead and let's change under details. We'll scroll down, and under fall off, we'll go ahead and set that to a linear fall off here. Let's go ahead and render that. Everything's black. I'm going to go ahead and increase this the radius decay. So I'm going to go ahead and set that to something quite a bit higher. Okay, and then we can do again another render. So we get a little bit more depth. You can see the a little bit more of the shadows and depth in this. And right now it's kind of running all together, but we'll kind of separate things out a little bit and we can tweak it as we go. I also want to add a little bit of light back here on this ball in the back. And so let's add another light. Let's add a spotlight. So for the spotlight, we can sort of move it into position here. And you can see right now it's right over here. So I'm going to go ahead and just move it over. And we can rotate it. Okay. And I want it to sort of hit this ball here. I also want to kind of rotate it down so it's kind of coming down from the top. So I'll kind of move it into position here. And let's kind of rotate it around a little bit more from this angle. Okay, let's go into this light and we can modify some of the parameters here. I'm going to take the intensity down just a little bit. We do want shadows, so we can turn on area shadows. And for the fall off, let's go ahead and set that to an inverse square. Okay. Now if you want to just take a look, you've probably done this, and we'll go ahead and just do an interactive render region, and we'll just take this around that ball there and see how that's looking. And I'm going to go ahead and take the quality up. And I'm going to go ahead and brighten it back up a little bit, I think. So it's all up to you what you want to do. I just wanted to add a little bit more light on there. So the last thing that we want to do is I want to create some depth in here. And so let's go ahead and turn off our render region. So what we can do is in the camera, we can turn on depth of field. I want to set the focus distance, and I'll just click on the little arrow and click on the words right up here. And then under details, we can choose to blur the rear. And I want to start from kind of midway through this line here, kind of behind here. So I'm going to start at about 500, start the blur, and ended at about 3,500. You can play with different values for that. Now with those on, we still need to go in and activate our depth of field. So I want to add it as an effect, going into render settings, effect, and let's add depth of field. And for the blur strength, we can go ahead and leave it at default and just see what that looks like. So let's go ahead and render this to our picture viewer. So go ahead and let that render up. All right, there you can see the effect of the depth of field. Now obviously, well maybe not so obviously, I think it's a little bit too much. So we can reduce the depth of field, and we can also move back the point that it starts from. And so let's go ahead first and try just reducing that amount. So I'm just going to take this entire blur strength and let's take it down to about 3%. Okay, let's go ahead and re-render before we change anything else, just to kind of narrow things down a little bit. So I'll re-render to picture viewer. I think that looks a lot better. We could kind of nudge the blur back a little bit by changing the values, but I think that looks pretty good as far as what I want to go for. I also probably want to add a few more letters in here. We can do that by going into our word sweep cloner and just increasing the amount of letters that we're using there. Okay, so now what we want to do is actually finish up our MoGraph project in the next lesson by just adding some materials to all of these pieces and just creating our final look. So we'll go ahead and finish up this section and the rest of the introduction to Cinema 4D in the next lesson.